I think when I went to uni 10 years ago, this whole entrepreneurship word didn't really exist.
There are a lot of students in the audience. Can you tell us about your university, your education, your background, and some of your first entrepreneurial adventures?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Brisbane, live in Sydney now. Grew up in Brisbane, studied commerce and law at uni of Queensland, and started a business very unwittingly when I was at uni, just being asked to be barman at bar parties. And finally I had a big function where they asked me to bring a couple of mates, and they all got paid, and I thought I should have got paid for introducing them to this party. So fast forward about a year, and it was a mate and I set up DNA bar services, and we provided bar staff to caterers for private functions. We had about 35 casuals on our books and provided staff that were pretty much fully utilised every weekend. So it was just a fun way to put ourselves through uni. We didn't really realise, I think when I went to uni 10 years ago, this whole entrepreneurship word didn't really exist, and we were just having a bit of fun, getting invited to a lot of parties and making a bit of money on the weekends. So it was good fun. And then we ended up selling that when I left uni, which was a bit of a laugh.
Yeah, sure thing. Can you talk us through, you know, how to sell a business is obviously an element of this talk. Like, how did you actually sell that small business that you had started at university?
So that one, again, just like how we started it and ran it, was entirely casual and unwitting. And we literally, when we both graduated and got jobs and we were moving away from Brisbane, decided, oh, let's just stop answering the phone, tell the caterers that we're not doing the business anymore, which we did. And then 2 weeks later, we got a call from another staffing agency saying, we're actually quite interested in acquiring your business. We're like, shit. So we plugged the answering machine back in, cranked it up, and spent a month really cranking the business and got all these caterers back on board and sold the business to a competing staffing agency, which was great. But the actual mechanisms of a sale, that was the first sale process, and I've been through the sale process with RedRoom. It's a really interesting process, negotiating a sale.
Yeah,
There's
cool.
100 different ways to skin a cat.
We'll go through the RedRoom
Sure.
process in a little bit. So RedRoom DVD, I suppose, is, you know, the business that, you know, you've probably spent most of your time, you know,
Yep.
building and growing and then selling.
Yep.
Can you tell us how that first came to life, and where the idea first came from,
Yep.
how you grew it in those initial stages?
Yeah, so when I finished commerce and law, and we sold RedRoom, and I moved to Sydney with Macquarie Bank and did banking for 3 years. And I remember 2 clear light bulb moments. You know, investment banking was fantastic, it was a great route, and I thought, this is ridiculous being 22 years old and earning, or 21, whatever I was, you're earning great money and doing really high caliber work, and it was good fun, but you're just working 100-hour weeks and you have no real creative outlet, no real control over your lifestyle or your destiny. So I really had a couple of moments where I thought, you know, is it worthwhile just taking the salary and sacrificing all these other creative pursuits that I want to do? And made a decision after about 2 years that it wasn't, that I was open to doing something else. And
Yep.
I remember I read a book that really changed it for me. I thought, oh, you know, it was a book called Enterprise and Venture Capital, and it was like, if you're
Sounds
an
like a
entrepreneur,
laugh a minute.
say that again. Yeah, really light reading. Yeah. But it's a great book, because it's like, if you're an entrepreneur, you probably have this, and it was just speaking to me. So then I was really open to ideas, and I was living at the time in a share house in Sydney, and a Frenchman, one of my housemates, sort of started talking about DVD vending machines, and since, you know, they're all over in every street corner in Paris, there's these DVD vending machines. Sort of our ears pricked up and sort of drilled him for information, researched it a lot, went back to Macquarie, got 3 months of unpaid leave, and we went to Europe and found out about these machines. They'd displaced about a third of the blockbusters since they'd been introduced in France. We sort of got very curious about this, so then I resigned and we brought in some machines, and that was sort of the start of RedRoom. So we're bringing in machines, and all of a sudden we needed a brand, an office, a business model, a strategy, and we sort of went straight from banking, and the other founder was in consulting, so we both sort of quit and opened 2 stores on day one.
That's amazing. How do you test a concept like that? Or do you test it at all, or do you just put it into the market and see what happens? I mean,
should you test it? Absolutely. Did we test it? No. We opened 2 full automated stores, which was brand new. This technology hadn't been used outside of Europe, where we brought the machines in from. And we opened 2 shops on day one and spent the next 2 years scrambling, trying to work out how to run a video shop, you know, how to build a brand, how to market, what marketing was this important, you know, all those things that in investment banking or commerce law, you don't learn.
Yep.
You know, you've got a great resume, but you don't really have a great skill set for driving a business. So that was an error, certainly. And in my new business, Maydate, I'm a lot more intentional about the clear stages of launching and growing a business. So in RedRoom, we went straight from the concept to scaling it.
Yep.
Which caused us to trip up a whole bunch of times. And then we pivoted our business model after 3 years. And then another 2 years, we pivoted our business model away from these big stores to small machines. Whereas if we had have been, in hindsight, a lot more considered about it, we might have gone, slowly and really tested which of the business models, the retail strategies work best before scaling.
Yeah, sure thing. Did you have to secure investment for the business to launch those 2 stores or to bring the initial kiosks in?
We did. So when I left Macquarie, we put in a bunch of cash,
Yep.
and then my old boss actually was great. I went back and asked for another 9 months of unpaid leave, and he said, "Good." He said, "No, buddy. He said, you got to resign, but I'm happy to back you into the business." So he was on the board for the full 7 years.
Yep.
And he's a brilliant guy, and he was a big investor and personal mentor.
That's amazing.
That was great. So we raised about $700,000 off of the business plan,
Yep.
which didn't actually seem that hard to do back then. It's a lot harder, I think, to raise funds now because there's so many startups and entrepreneurs vying for capital.
Yep.
And it's post-GFC, it's definitely a different world than it was back in 2005 that we were raising that cash. But yeah, we had almost $1 million to launch, and then we raised another $5 million over the course of the business.
Wow, that's amazing.
To build 100 outlets.
So what was in that business plan that did help you raise that initial $700,000 to $1 million in the early stages?
The one thing you're really good at when you do investment banking is building PowerPoint decks. So I had like a 70-page cracker of a deck.
That's why everyone at Macquarie gets paid so much. Amazing at PowerPoint.
Amazing PowerPoint, because it's true. So it was a killer deck. And we also went to the States and we spoke to a whole bunch of people. And it's a really good business concept, I think, fundamentally. And we were very arrogant and confident about, how this was going to be an enormous business in 2 years. It was going to take over the world, and then we were going to do the same in the States. So I think a really good deck. The key parts of it, what were the key parts? All the things, you can read about this stuff. So really good projections, but really sane projections. But again, I think it's a very different world now, especially in tech startups. It's a very different world now about what your financials should look like and how you should present your business roadmap, as opposed to what it used to be. They just wanted to see 5-year projected financials with a really big, ramp up and potential to sell it for $20 million in 3 years. They needed to see that blue sky, whereas it's not the case now.
Yep.
You can sell that to, a fool, but a proper strategic investor understands that your projections when you're a startup are just, finger in the air. You can make it say whatever you want. So back then we had a really solid financial model. And we had great financial projections. We had a really clear strategy. We had the market broken up. We'd spoken to all the players in Europe who were doing this and had clear report on what they were doing well and why it was working, and then adapted to Australia, which is the biggest DVD renting nation per capita in the world. It made sense that over the next 5 years, these automated machines would be a good bridge between the demise of Blockbuster and the growth of online distribution of film. So it was a really solid pitch.
Yep. Yeah, amazing. So can you talk us through, you mentioned to us in one of the pre-interviews about the 4 stages of growth for a startup. Can you talk us through those 4 stages and how they sort of, applied to your experience, but also maybe how they could apply to other people's businesses?
For sure. So these 4 stages are not necessarily mine.
Yeah.
I can't credit them to anyone. They're an amalgamation of a whole bunch of things. Well, they're probably some ones, I just can't remember whose. So I look at startups, or the early stage of a startup now in 4 stages. So there's number 1, the idea stage. Number 2, the validation stage. Number 3 is efficiency, and number 4 is scale.
Yep.
Right, so number 1 in that concept or that idea stage, it's sort of having an idea, what are we going to do? For Maydate, it was about how can we have like an online dating site where this is my new business, where your friends are recommending dates to you, because that's how most relationships start offline, but there's no online mechanism to activate your social network so your friends suggest dates. So that was sort of the concept, and we developed the idea into a plan. The second stage is validation. So before you go and spend millions of bucks building, this was the old school, what we did with RedRoom, before you spend $1 million building something that you think is a brilliant idea and launching it, or even before you spend 100 grand doing it, just build something, even if it's an offline paper version of your website, just build something, what they call in lean startup called the minimum viable product, or your MVP, and just launch your MVP and get real customers, paying customers, and form the right hypotheses to try to test, does this thing work? And just put it out there. Because the chances are it doesn't. The first idea is never the right idea, or is very rarely the right idea, and you've got to be willing to learn and listen to customers and get this feedback. So that's the whole validation stage, which could take 6 months, and that's the best stage to raise some cash in. Launch your MVP, do a quick couple of development sprints, this is more for tech businesses, to really get to a stage where you can say, right, we've got a concept, and this is the stage we're at now with Maydate. It works. We might have 100 customers, but it's a really great experience. They all rate it really highly. We've surveyed them all. It's a really good concept that they're willing to pay for. Then you can go into efficiency. So, for every 1,000 people that come to your website, how many are clicking through and signing up and falling out through the process? So you optimize your funnel and just make the business as unleaky as possible, so as efficient as possible. And only when you've done that, I think, does it make sense to go into the 4th stage of scaling. And then you can pump money into marketing, and then you can beef up your team, and then you can grow. What we did at RedRoom, erroneously, was we went straight to the scale stage on day 1. We had this great concept. They were like, great, got money, opened 2 shops on day 1, certainly without validating the concept fully, and certainly without making sure that for a retail store that we had our right marketing strategies and were acquiring and keeping customers properly. And then we spent years and $1 million recovering from that.
Yeah, wow.
Whereas with Maydate, we're very, very considered to put it through these stages and very considered the times at which we raise cash and presenting to investors these clear stages. This is where we're at. The next money will see us through the efficiency in the first 6 months of the scale stage, and that resonates really well with investors.
Yeah, sure thing.
So a lot of that comes from Eric Ries and Lean Startup, which is the big buzzword if you're doing any tech sort of business. Eric Ries and the Lean Startup is a book that's essential reading, and certainly in the Valley or anywhere in the States is what everyone's all about, lean startup. You want to be a lean startup sort of entrepreneur.
So you mentioned the business plan at RedRoom and the strategy and the projections. How much did the business plan and the strategy actually pan out in reality? Was it fairly spot on?
We have a new business plan every 6 months. So,
yeah, sure thing.
So if I go back to our very original business plan, it was funny. We hit over, so RedRoom was a 7-year journey. The strategy in terms of, we always said there were 3 phases of RedRoom. Full automated, company-owned automated stores, franchise stores, and thirdly, company-owned small machines. Like we had about a whole bunch in Canberra as well. Canberra is a really great market for us. So we always said there were going to be these 3 stages as Blockbusters fell off a cliff and as digital continued to face struggles. And that's what played out. We went through those three stages. In terms of our initial financials, our financial model back in 2005 bears no resemblance whatsoever to how the P&Ls played out over the next 7 years.
Yeah. So how did you grow the business? I mean, to go from, starting with 2 stores is a big investment, but then by the end of it to have 300,000 members, 30 full-time staff. Can you, do the best to take all those years and translate them into about 5 minutes?
Sure. There's a whole bunch of facets. We were still always in the startup and expansion stage, I think, even after 7 years. We never really got to maturity. We were always in expansion stage. Maybe the best way to answer that is to look at, say, the 5 factors of growing a business. Again, this should be credited to someone, but it's just amalgamated. So number 1, I think a company needs to have, so there's vision, clear strategy, people have to be accountable for it, engaged, and you've got to have a good internal rhythm in the company. So I think vision, you hear a lot about vision, having a core mission and purpose and brand promise, all that stuff, which I think is really important, not necessarily at the concept or validation stage of a startup, because it's a bit contrived at that stage. You just want to get a concept that works. Don't so much worry about your vision really early on. But once you're looking to scale and raise money and put staff on in particular, it's really clear to know what your vision is as a company. And vision's things like Walt Disney is to make people happy. And that will guide you when you're bringing staff on, that'll guide you when you're saying no to all the ideas and distractions that come your way. If it's not on vision, then you don't do it. So vision's really important. And at RedRoom, our vision was to better connect people to entertainment.
Okay.
Right, we were really passionate about better connecting through having web reservation. We were going to go into digital distribution, automated machines, open 24/7, new release movies, $2.95. So everything we did sort of spoke to our vision to better connect people to entertainment. At Maydate, we're just sort of forming up our vision now, but it's about creating opportunity for others, which is something that really excites us and gets us out of bed. The second thing, so that's vision. The second one is strategy. So you've got to be really clear about what do you need to do what do you need to do, when do you need to do it, and how are we going to achieve this vision. So there's a whole bunch of ways. We have there's a guy, Vern Harnish, and a really good website called Gazelles, and he's got this book called The Rockefeller Habits, and that's a really good resource we found for a lot of this stuff, but certainly for building a one-page plan that says, this is what our vision is, this is where we want to be in 3 or 5 years, and then this is the 1-year goals, then quarterly goals. At each quarter, you sort of revise your quarterly plan. So that was really good strategy setting for us, and in terms of what are the 5 most important things we need to do this quarter. So that's the strategy. The other 3 are all about execution. So that's accountability. So then who's going to do what by when? So internally and bringing people on. Engagement, so hiring A players who buy into your vision and want to make sure this happens. And then your cadence or your meeting rhythm. So how are you internally reporting? You're having daily huddles and weekly meetings and quarterly booze ups, and what's your internal meeting rhythm to make sure people are accountable and engaged. I think the key thing with that I found at RedRoom and with Made8 is visibility. Yep. So if you can make your mission or your purpose as a company visible, and you can make staff members, what's expected of them, really visible, so up on A4s or as their desktop, visibility drives sort of engagement because people know what is expected of them. At the weekly meetings, they're saying, yes, I did my task from last week, which makes them feel good. So visibility, you can drive accountability through visibility. And then when people are accountable, they're engaged and they're succeeding and they're doing well. Or else they're not, and it becomes really obvious really quickly and you move them on. So the visibility of what's expected of people really drives accountability and engagement. So I think that was the key thing from RedRoom is don't do this plan and then just have it saved in a locked folder. Print it out and put it everywhere you can. Make sure everyone knows what's expected in a really visible fashion.
Yep. What did you personally learn from the RedRoom experience in growing and building that business?
Heaps of stuff. So RedRoom really was a 7-year MBA. You can't learn this skill set anywhere, I don't think. I feel so fortunate to have gone through the process. I learned a whole bunch of things out of RedRoom. I think the most important things would be, there's a whole bunch, so I'll just kind of rattle off some. One would be not to sell. So when you're doing this, or not to sell internally, or even to investors, rather than get out there and be waving the flag from the front and saying you can do everything and there's no problems and you'll solve this and it's fine. I kind of think that puts a lot of pressure on you, and it's much better to enrol investors and enrol staff in the business authentically, be really transparent about numbers and enrol everyone on the journey the whole way through and invite people to be proposing suggestions, and if you hit an obstacle, be really transparent about it. And if everyone buys into the company's vision, then people don't leave. People will, we found when we had a situation like this, we had staff offered to all go down to 4 days. The whole team came to me actually at one stage after about 4 years and said, we've decided we're happy to go down to 4 days a week, and only pay us 4 days a week, and we'll all sort of mandatory 1 day off if you need this for cash flow for the next. I was like, no, it's not that bad, but amazing that your staff would actually offer that to you when they're engaged. So I think not constantly selling and promising, but really authentically engaging people in the journey was one of my biggest takeout out of RedRoom. I think other things is just make sure you've got enough cash in the bank. It's no fun being, I think any startup, there's no such thing as an overcapitalised startup. So you've never got too much cash in the bank. It's just a matter of the rate at which you spend it. Try to have a good 6-12 month, when you're in the startup cash burn phase, a good 6-12 month runway. Otherwise it's really stressful. Yep. And it always takes longer to raise funds than generally. It always takes longer to raise funds than you think. And the other key lesson out of RedRoom was, as I've mentioned before, making sure you prove up the business at the unit model before you try to scale it. If you try to scale it prematurely, which as entrepreneurs, I think we always get very excited and confident, this is the best idea, consumers just don't know, once we spend $1 million marketing, this is going to be big, look at my model. It's like, actually just go and prove it with 100 customers before you spend all that money on scaling. And be prepared to listen and learn. And this is what a lot of the writings say now is the key quality of entrepreneurs that is assessed for in skills-based testing in the States is willingness to learn. So they want to find entrepreneurs who, sure, you're confident, but you're willing to learn. You're willing to listen to people and to iterate your business model. Be fully accepting that chances are your first idea is not your right one. So you're willing to listen to customers, pivot your model a couple of times to get a solution that works. And if it doesn't, then pack it down and find another idea. That's one of the key things that people are looking for.
Sure thing. What would your advice be to a student if they came up to you and said, look, I really want to start my own business and get out there and do this? What should I do? Like, what should I study? What should I be doing now?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I get this a lot. The one question I hate is, I just need an idea.
Yeah.
You know, people say that all the time. I just need an idea, and then I'd do this. This would be, you know, just need to find that idea, and that's. I just detest that on so many levels. Like a carpenter saying, "I'd be a great carpenter if I just had a bit of wood." You know, it's like, well, I can go get a bit of wood. You know, so I think it's all about putting yourself in the path of opportunity, which is something that I'm really passionate about. You know, if you know that. I think not everyone's an entrepreneur, right? So get confident. Are you ready for the risk profile? Because you've got to be ready to live with no money on very limited salary, and it's really risky. You know, if you've got a partner and kids or a mortgage, then it's a lot harder to be an entrepreneur and start up a business from scratch. I think when you're at uni, you're at the perfect stage, or if you don't have any major commitments, you're at the perfect stage to take a punt. And I would encourage everyone to do that, because as you get later in life, it becomes harder and harder and harder to do. Or the risks associated with failing become so much greater, which then sort of holds you back and curbs your behaviour. So if anyone's at uni still, I'd say, you know, to go for it and put yourself in the path of opportunity. So if you're, you know, if you don't know what your idea is, then be reading The Cool Hunter, Springwise, you know, Pedestrian, be reading all this pop culture stuff, find out what's happening around the world, be reading TechCrunch, and something will drop. You know, go to the States, meet with people. If you really like bars and want to get into, it doesn't have to be tech. If you really like bars and small bars, then go out and meet all the people who own small bars in Canberra. You know, just put yourself in the path of opportunity, and you can create, you sort of, sounds very the secret, but you just kind of create your future, and you create your opportunities by, I'll credit that to The Secret.
We're selling The Secret. It's
yeah,
just
that's right.
there on a little shelf, yeah. So yeah. And Dan's signing copies.
That's right. Definitely not signing copies of The Secret. But you know, I think if you really put yourself out there in the path of opportunity and tell people what you're doing, what you're looking for, then something will come along.
Yep.
You know, and if you're in the right position where you're ready to pounce on it, then that's something will come along. I heard I can't remember her name, but the COO of Facebook spoke to the Harvard...
Sheryl Sandberg.
There you go. Sheryl Sandberg spoke to the graduating class of Harvard this year, and just watched her speech. I'm not sure if you saw her speech. But she's made a couple of great comments to the people leaving Harvard about, you know, when you go out there, forget about this career plan, forget about resume building. She's like, build your skill set. So take a risk, find a startup that you like and get in and drive one of their departments, or get into a company that you like and drive. You're not going to be there for more than a couple of years, most likely, but build your skill set so that, you know, when you leave Harvard with this great education, you know, fast forward 5 years and you've got, it's kind of what I wish I had have done rather than at Macquarie Bank. I wish I had have gone to smaller, more exciting companies and build some skill sets. Puts you in a lot better position to sort of spot opportunities, be hanging around with entrepreneurs, investors, and be in this community and be developing really essential skills that you can then put into a startup if you want to actually start up your own biz.
Cool. And maybe a question, you know, that will help out some of the people who actually have their own businesses or in the middle of, you know, their own startups would be, I guess, at RedRoom, when did you know that maybe you'd sort of had enough and you wanted to start looking for a sale, and, you know, how did you start preparing for an exit?
Yep. We'd been going for 7 years,
yep.
So I don't know, I get distracted very easily. You know, we have a short attention span. We were a capital-driven business. We had over 100 physical outlets, so our plan was to get to 100 outlets. We funded it through to 105. We got to 105. We then thought, okay, well, let's go for 500 outlets. We thought the market in Australia could support about 2,000, which is what's sort of on track to getting. So we went out to the market to look for a strategic partner to fund us and work with us through to 500 outlets. And that's when we came across Video Easy, who own Blockbuster and Sanity and Easy DVD, and they're the biggest home entertainment company. Yep. Came across them and had a coffee, and they wanted to get into the space. And it's an interesting thing when you're a small brand like us and you're dealing with Video Easy, who are this big household brand you've grown up with, and you just sit down with the two guys that own the company, and they've just bought Blockbuster and Sanity, and you kind of, one part of you says, oh, what can we add to them? And someone gave me some really good advice at the time that as a young emerging brand, you really can't underestimate what you give to a big brand. You know, it's like when say McDonald's decided to start selling nudie juice, while people think, oh, it's a huge thing for nudie now to be sold. it's actually a massive thing for McDonald's because big brands find it hard to innovate, and to be associated with young, cool, innovative brands is priceless for them. So for us as a really fast-growing, innovative, young brand as RedRoom, we could actually offer a whole lot to Video Easy.
So how did that conversation, I mean, how does a conversation like that come about? Do you just contact the company, and what actually goes on? Like, how do you prepare for that coffee? I'm imagining it's a reasonably big coffee if they're the only people who own all the DVD stores in Australia. You can't knock on the door of Blockbuster because they'll be, go talk to those guys.
Yeah, that's right.
Had coffee with them already.
Same door.
Yeah.
I think in any sale process, the number one key is to have a competitive process. So don't run a process with one party because you get screwed at the death.
Yeah.
So we had other parties, all the other key players you'd think in the industry, and the IP the digital film distribution players as well. Because as a model, we acquired customers really cheaply through these machines compared to traditional stores and compared to online. So we made a lot of sense to even the online players like QuickFlix and Big Pond Movies. So we ran a really competitive process, and we had sort of 4 bidders for the company. So that's the process we went through. It ended up being a 12-month process that was protracted, and a deal fell over, and it certainly wasn't easy. So I'd say number one, have a competitive process, have a really structured competitive process, and have all horses running until as far as you can. You know, don't lock down on one horse until as far as you can. So a very tight binding term sheet, then you can put the others on ice, and preferably have an exclusivity period while they do due diligence. I think the other key thing, if you're looking to sell a startup, is get your company making money. So I see a whole bunch of businesses doing sale process while they've still got cash burn and a certain runway. And if you're an acquirer and you're looking at a business and you know they've got another 4 months runway, then by the time you do this deal, it's going to be 3 months later. They're going to have no cash in bank. You can just slow down for a month and they're buggered. So as a company that's trying to sell, you want to make sure it's sustainable. You've got a really good runway, or preferably you're making cash. You know, strip down the business and get it to a sustainable position where it's making cash before you try to sell.
So did you approach the 4 companies that were, part of the sale process, or were they coming to you and talking to you before that?
No, we approached. So when we were out looking for funding, so we were speaking to them about funding, and then when we decided to go down a route of selling 100%, we then went back and said, look, we're not looking to do a JV anymore or do any of the other structures. We're looking at a sale. Please let us know if you're interested, and we asked for indicative bids.
Yeah, sure.
So then we put on a corporate advisor and lawyers at that stage, and indicative bids were due by a certain stage, and some of them just didn't want to give bids and some did. If they give bids, you can go to the next stage and do a certain level of due diligence. They get a certain level of materials, after which they can you discuss terms and have a formal binding term sheet. And at that stage, one party will lock in, sign a formal binding term sheet, and then go and do all due diligence. Then you open everything to them, and assuming there's no surprises, they can't get out of the deal.
If you've spent 7 years working with a business, how do you find the right corporate advisor and the right lawyers to kind of help you through this incredibly important part of your business?
We got lucky. We had great advisors. We had Freehills on board to do that deal, who I probably wouldn't use a top-tier firm in the future because they cost an arm and a leg. But brilliant advice. So how do you find advisors? In our space, there was 2 advisors that specialise in entertainment industry.
Okay.
So they've done a whole bunch of deals. So we dealt with them because they knew this space back to front and knew who to pitch to.
Yeah, sure thing.
Lawyers, it was just personal connections. While we got into them, if I did it again, I've got someone else. So there's personal connections.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
RedRoom, you eventually sold to Video Easy, and then can you talk us through what did that feel like from as a business owner? You've spent 7 years building this business up, and then it's kind of no longer yours. Did it feel like relief? Did it feel like did you want to celebrate, or was it?
It was a whole basket of emotions. It was really funny. It was, as an entrepreneur, you kind of build your business to sell it. When we managed to sell it and sell 100% of it, and only have a very short workout period with the new acquirers, it was brilliant. But then by the same token, on that last day when all of our staff packed up their bags and moved out to Rhodes, out in out west in Sydney, it was, you see this look of disillusionment because I wasn't going out with them, and we had such a tight little office. It was really sad, and leaving that office on that last day there were heaps of tears. It was a hugely emotional journey.
Yeah, wow.
And it's just your baby. You'd grow this thing, and it's everything that you do for 7 years. So then when we sold that and finished the workout, I went overseas and just to escape and turned off the phone for 2 months, and it was a great way just to try to work out what comes next and to recover from all of that. But yeah, it was great. It was euphoric, and it was brilliant that saw it through that whole cycle, and was elation, but it was really sad. And then when we found out they started to take down the RedRoom brand, and they've decided to rebrand it now, rebrand all our outlets Video Easy. That was a bit of a pity.
Yeah.
Because straight away, actually, you see how they start to run the business. I'm not sure how much of this I should be saying. And of course, that you can run it better than anyone else. So when you see how they're dealing with certain landlords and what they're doing, it's a bit upsetting because this is your brand all of a sudden, and then when they start taking down the brand and doing certain things that I didn't agree with, it's funny, that really distanced me from it. Yeah. So now I'm sitting here, and I think there's only about 20 RedRooms left in Australia. Wow. The rest have all been changed to Video Easy Express, and it's a big pity. Yeah. But what can you do?
Yeah. So, I guess onwards and upwards. Can you tell us about your latest startup, Mayday.com? Where did the idea come from for that, and how are you doing things differently?
So I went away to sort of work out, what do I want to do? Startups are really hard work, right? That's probably the other lesson from RedRoom is, you can sprint as hard as you want, but at some stage you've got to get into a groove because it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you've got to start to enjoy your weekends and take the foot off a bit because it's exhausting. It's really, really hard work. So I think when I went away for last year, when I had last year off and travelled and tried to think about what comes next, and I came back and I looked at a corporate job with setting up a new venture capital fund, and I looked at starting my own little startup business again, and it was very, very difficult. Yep. But decided to go down this route and do it again because that's just sort of what I enjoy doing, and following lean startup really strictly, following these stages of funding and trying to make it a textbook lean startup, which I find really exciting. But the idea for Mayday, it could have been anything. I'm not passionate about online dating. Like everyone else, I've never used it, because that's what everyone says. But as a friend of mine over dinner, about a year ago, bailed me up over dinner and was like, who do you know that you can set me up on a date with? And I was like, I'm not sure, Georgia. She's like, well, I'm beautiful and I'm 30 and I'm successful, and why can't I? I'm like, you'll find someone, it's okay. She's like, no, you always say that. I'm like, be patient, maybe you've got to be patient. And she's like, get out your phone, look through your who do you know? I was like, shit. So I pulled out my phone and scrolled through and thought, actually, do you know a mate of mine, Rob? She's like, no. I'm like, And I opened Facebook and said my Facebook message said, Rob, meet Georgia, Georgia, meet Rob, go get a coffee. I'm busy having dinner, got to go. And they went out and moved in together. And it was when I went to Japan last year, and I was like, most relationships start through family and friends, and 1 or 2 degrees of separation is where 60% of Australian relationships started. But that's all offline, meeting through, cocktail parties or barbecues. Rarely do single people call out to their friends for help and say, who do you know that I would be a good match with? And rarely do our friends think about, who can I set up my single buddies with? So I thought there's got to be a mechanism here to bring this online. The online dating industry is just enormous. Right? 1 in 8 marriages in the States last year met on eHarmony, just one site. So it's enormous. 20% of relationships in Australia between 25 and 35 started online. Wow. So it's huge. It's becoming very, very mainstream. But we wanted to find a way to activate your social network so your friends are setting you up on dates. And then, so that was the premise. That's what I was really passionate about. So what happens with Mayday, I don't think I described it. People sign up at Mayday. It's free to sign up and start a 30-day campaign to get some dates. So it's free to sign up. It's kind of like Movember. So you start a 30-day campaign to get some dates. And you do 2 things. Number 1, you invite up to 5 friends through Facebook or through email to participate. So 5 trusted. There's no photos or profiles or anything. You invite 5 friends through email to participate in your campaign and suggest some dates. And the second thing you do is you have to promise to make a donation to one of our charities. We've got 4 charities on board. Promise to make a donation to one of our charities if your friend sets you up on a date. So we then, as Mayday, go out to your friends. We've got a whole bunch of corporate backers as well. So we go out to your friends and say, stop, take 5 minutes. Who do you know that you could set your buddy up on a date with? If you suggest someone, they're going to give $50 to Camp Quality or Heart Foundation. Plus we're going to give you movie tickets, and we've got prizes that we give to your friends if they actually propose dates. So that was the idea, and then we make money because we take a percentage of the funds raised on behalf of the charity. So that was the idea. We've launched it. We've launched our MVP late last year. It's gone really well. We've done no marketing yet. We've had a whole bunch of campaigns. We've set up our first 30 relationships, and it's kind of working. The singles that are doing this are saying it's a really good source of potentially compatible partners, which is the panacea for us. So we're doing a whole bunch of little things now about integrating with your social networks so you can propose people from your LinkedIns and your Facebooks. And it is the world's first trust-based online dating site. So the people that are suggested are actually put forward by your friends. Even though there's no photos or profiles, you can stalk them online, but you don't have photos or profiles. It's the world's first trust-based online dating site. So that was sort of how the idea came about.
Yep. So what's the future for Mayday? Like, I mean, where are you planning on, I guess you're in the early stages of the lean startup model.
Yep.
How does the future roll out?
So in those 4 stages, we've got the concept. I think I had the concept when I was overseas. The validation stage, we launched the MVP, our minimum viable product, this really lean little website.
Which is very, very cute.
It's great.
Like, it really stood out graphic design-wise.
It is. It's probably a bit more than an MVP because bit of a perfectionist, unfortunately, so we sort of overdeveloped it. But it's a really good site. I'd love it if people wanted to give it a shot and give me any feedback through the site because we've got a whole bunch of beta users using it and it's working really well. You have to be single though. So the plan is we're in the validation stage. We're pretty much validated. We had sort of about 5 assumptions that we were trying to prove. We're still proving up one of them about how to really make your connectors and your friends really active and passionate about this. And then at the end of that, we move into the efficiency stage. So we decided, to self-funded, because we want to launch in the States very soon after the middle of the year. We're looking for some funding now to help us move into the States, to launch in the States in about 4 or 5 months. And then we go through the efficiency stage, and then in May is when we scale. So we're really diligent about following out all these stages of when we scale the business. But the plan, we're sort of forming a vision now. The plan is to raise $1 billion for charity. So Movember each year raises about, last year they raised about $111 million worldwide through Movember. So our big, hairy, audacious goal with Mayday is to raise $1 billion for charity and set 1 million people up on dates, which is really exciting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yep. How much have you raised so far?
Not a whole lot. But it's in the 4 figures.
Yeah.
But,
nice.
You know, it's just one step at a time. We haven't done any marketing yet. It's going. We couldn't be happier with it. But there's a whole bunch to go. It's a very lean team. We haven't started really recruiting yet, and haven't started any marketing. So there's a whole bunch to do.
And I mean, I guess RedRoom was largely kind of bricks and mortar kiosks.
Yep.
You know, this is a digital business. How's the process of starting them being different? I mean, do you find, I think there is a lot of talk around, you know, start something in the digital space because it's cheaper and it's easier and you can, you know, grow quicker and scale quicker, as opposed to, you know, bricks and mortar where you might need $1 million. Like, is that true? Or
that's definitely true. And we launched Mayday, and I sat there just waiting for the campaigns to start and watching my analytics and seeing that literally 2 people visited the site through the whole day, and one of them was me and the other was probably mum. You open 2 RedRoom stores and we have 1,000 people through our doors in the first week. So just acquiring customers, that whole how do you acquire traffic and customers and convert them with an online business. With a retail store, you open in a good location, that's why it's location with retail stores, and that does it for you. Online, it's very, very different. You can have a website up, anyone here can have a website up and an AdWords campaign running, driving traffic to that site within an hour. So there's no barriers to entry to opening a site, but that's not the trick. It's what's your site doing, you know, how's it creating value, how are you going to acquire customers, and you know, what are they worth, all those things. So it's very, very different from a physical store.
Yep.
I think the big difference for me between RedRoom and Mayday as well is I started RedRoom with a buddy, so we were 2 of us. Mayday I'm doing by myself, and I've got to say, if anyone's looking at starting a business, it's a lot more fun to do it with someone else. And when you're just doing it by yourself, you kind of bounce off the walls. There's no one to really share things with. So it's a really interesting process. I think in the early stages, you know, 1 + 1 = about 5 in terms of co-founders, and certainly in the States, all startups, it's all co-founders. So you really want preferably an online and a tech co-founder.
Well, yeah, we might open up to the audience now for questions.
Quick question about how what your initial plan is to expand Mayday, and you said, for example, you're going to the US.
Yep.
Are you guys planning to partner with someone, or what's your initial marketing strategy around that?
Yeah, so marketing strategy, one of the key things we haven't done is proven out our customer acquisition channel yet. So there's a whole bunch of ways you can acquire customers as a retail business and drive traffic, whether it's search engine marketing or SEO or through affiliates or channels, and there's a whole bunch of options. So we haven't worked out exactly what our best channels are. We haven't even started testing that yet. It's really just validating it to the existing customers. So the next step is really to prove out that we can acquire customers. Now we've got something of value and it works. We get compatible partners for single people. It's a matter of how can we acquire customers. So that's the key challenge over the next couple of months. Then we looked international. I want to go to the States because it's something also that I want to do. I want to, you know, I just want to have offices in London and New York. I'm not sure if that's a sound business expansion strategy. Yeah, so that's something I'm passionate about. The US as a market is huge. There's no one doing what we're doing in the States. And I think if we can evolve and get validated learnings and grow and execute this business as quickly as I plan to, with the right capital base, then we should be at the front of the pack in the States. So I've chosen the States because personally it has a lot of attraction, and it's a big market, and we've got a competitive advantage in that no one else is really doing this in the States. But then in terms of other regions, I think the decisions for anyone expanding overseas are: do you build it yourself, like we'll do in the States? Do you license it to a third party? So sort of just license the brand and take 5% of revenue, or do you JV? So in the States, it'll certainly be build, which will take time. But then when we look at other English-speaking countries, we'll probably build. It's early days. Non-English speaking countries, you'd probably be smartest to license the concept out or to JV it.
Dan, how do you stop people copying your ideas?
Online business, you can't. I think people get very hung up on the risk of a copycat. We've got to be in stealth mode, you know, not tell anyone about it, and just keep the whole business top secret, not have a customer for as long as possible. Whereas I think with online, I mean, there's certainly some things you can do to protect IP if you've got protectable IP. Maydate doesn't really have any intellectual property to protect, so it wasn't something that we can do in terms of protectable IP. If you've got an idea, I think the only thing that is really protectable is your speed of execution, your speed of learning and your execution. So if you've got a concept out there and you just want to pig-headedly plug away at that concept for a year, chances are someone around the world will copy you and do what you're doing with an online business. But if you're constantly iterating and learning and developing the business, then that's something that's difficult for others to copycat, because what they copycat now and put out in 3 months, you're in a very different place. So it's, I think there's a lot of fear. I mean, if someone made a good comment to me, they said, if you went and pitched your business to RSVP, you know, for them to invest in, they're probably too busy to even look at this, because they're all busy. They're certainly not looking at developing this themselves. You know, so your competitors are usually pretty occupied doing their own thing, and they've got, you know, all their own agendas. So risk of copycat, it always exists, but I just focus on execution and speed of learning.
One last question over here.
Did you have any mentors initially, and how did you find them, and what value did you get from business mentors?
Yeah, that's a great question. My mentor was my old boss from Macquarie Bank, who ended up backing us into RedRoom, and he was great, and he's just an eccentric, successful banker, but great experience. So he was a real mentor in terms of growing a business. How do you get mentors is kind of a tough question. Especially the startup space, because anyone who's been through this and has profile gets hounded from people wanting a mentor. So it's kind of tough to, it's tough. So how do you get a mentor if you're a startup? I think you've got to convince, but preferably a personal connection, I guess, is easy to say. If you're looking to raise capital, then someone who can put in cash and also be a mentor, because people who have done this, and especially the old successful people, really want to help and give back. But it's just hard to choose which of the 5 approaches you get a week do you want to back. But if an investor is a perfect type of mentor. There's a whole bunch of ways you can get exposure to people, certainly through Coach, the New Business Pedestrian's doing. There's an entrepreneurs organisation, StartMate, PushMate, these are Sydney-based ones. There's a Canberra entrepreneurs organisation that I'm aware of. So be part of these groups and you meet people, and they will usually get experienced entrepreneurs in, and it's just pitching to them as to, rather than, I want you to help me out, it's like you want to find how they can add value. You know, through your experience with Lyle, I think you could add a whole bunch of value. Would you mind if I took you for breakfast? So, I know I'm rambling a bit, but how I got mentors, because I wanted mentors when I did Maydate who were really in this space. I wanted a tech guru and an online marketing guru. So I actually emailed a couple of people and said, you know, I want to take you for breakfast every fortnight for the next 3 months for 45 minutes and pick your brain. And you're going to have this other person there as well who was another good brand. They were like, sure, sounds like a good idea. So you want to really make it appealing for them. And I get so much value out of that from having those 2 people. So you want to really sell it, make it appealing, and pay for lunch.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Dan. That was amazing.
Pleasure.
And all right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming down. ANU is the first university that we stopped by to do one of these sessions. We're going to be doing 7 more around Australia. There's a few more with a bit of an entrepreneurial spin like we did today. So all the talks are being filmed and being uploaded to the pedestrian.tv website. So stay tuned. And yeah, there's going to be lots of inspiring talks coming. Cheers, guys. Thank you.